Hello everybody, Shane1288 here with another episode of RSBANDB Update Supplemental. Today is June 16th, and today is the day that many people have been waiting for in RuneScape, and that is the day that we get to have a first look at Legacy Mode, the combat mode for the game that takes us back effectively to the pre-Evolution of Combat timeline. So, this is a beta, so as I've mentioned before, with beta software, specifically on RuneScape, we need to make sure that we treat it as such and not have any too wildly high expectations for the software because it's a beta and it's being worked on and continually refined and polished to bring it up to the standards that it needs to be when it will ultimately appear in the game as a final product. So with that being said, don't be afraid to give this beta a try. It's available to both free players and members, and your progress will not be transferred over to the main game. I know this is something that some people, when they first play a RuneScape beta, don't realize is that what you're doing in the beta server on these betas that are more disconnected from the main game, you might get a couple of levels, you might get a really interesting drop, and you might expect that to transfer over to your main account. That will not happen in this case, so that is just a fair warning to everybody out there that progress does not transfer over. With it being beta, I want to highlight that it's still being polished, as I have already highlighted, but if you find a bug or you see something that needs to be fixed, report it using either the in-game report feature or by creating a topic on the Legacy forums, where you can say what's wrong and what might be a good way to fix this and see what other players think as well. Too many times in the past we've had betas in RuneScape where the feedback has been an angry mob, and this angry mob has really detracted from useful feedback that players want to give. So if you're going to be playing the Legacy Mode beta, please provide useful feedback and do not be yelling at the Jagex moderators. That just makes their jobs way too hard to do in sorting through all the feedback that's given to them. Alright, so with that being said, the Legacy Mode beta does provide a very close replica to what the game looked like prior to the release of the Evolution of Combat. Granted, there are some visual differences in that it's using the brown scheme rather than the silver-blue theme, but I think overall players did prefer the brown theme to the silver and blue theme. It's good for those who will want either a refreshing look at how RuneScape used to be without logging into RS Classic or, heaven forbid, Old School. It's also good for those who just want to sit back, relax, and try combat out as to how it used to be. Like, let's say you're just doing a Slayer task that doesn't require anything intensive. Well, Legacy Mode might be an option for that. On that same note, Legacy is slower than the Evolution of Combat, which is to be expected, and we were all warned of. So that is something that players will need to decide, is do I want fast XP, as fast as it can be with manually ability activation, or do I just want to have a more casual experience and, take the game at my own pace? That's something players will have to decide, and I have a feeling that for most Slayer tasks, especially for people who have created their account prior to the release of the Evolution of Combat, we will see Legacy Mode maybe be the dominant version of the game for people who really didn't have a high uptake towards EOC or just want something much simpler. I've been thinking over the past couple days in the lead up to this release for a real-life parallel as to what Legacy Mode actually is in terms of RuneScape. And the clearest form of comparison that I can think of personally that I've been seeing in various online postings and some news reports is that Legacy Mode will ultimately, for me, be likened to the current conservative movement in the United States. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that they're exactly the same, but there are some striking similarities. The first one being is that players who want Legacy Mode or even play Old School want to go back to a time when they feel was good, a time that they feel was excellent, the height of all achievement, let's say. And for most people in the conservative movement in the United States, this involves going back to a time when Ronald Reagan was president. Now, I can empathize with that, but even if we were to completely duplicate the experience that we had during that great time, whether it be when Ronald Reagan was president or when Legacy Mode was the main form of combat on RuneScape, bringing it to 2014 will not yield the same result. You can have the same sort of outlook in that you're looking for something that provides the same end goals, and that's easy combat, a much simpler experience, and overall just a more conservative feeling of RuneScape in general. We can achieve those, but it's not going to be completely the same, and that's exactly the same way as it would be if, for example, some U.S. candidate who wanted to run in the 2016 election would espouse the same values as Ronald Reagan did. It would be nice to hear, but it wouldn't exactly be the same. And on the same note, that would not necessarily work in the real world, and I'm not sure that it will work in RuneScape to the best benefit of the game's future. So basically what I'm getting at is that we can duplicate the past all that we want to make it feel good and make everyone feel happy with it, but an old solution might not be what the game needs. So while it looks nice and it feels nice, there might be a better way of actually doing this that brings both communities together and makes both people feel at home. So I'll be talking more about this on this week's show on Saturday, which is a live show. I'll get to the details in just a moment. But keep that in mind, is that, yes, we're going back to an old time, but maybe there's a way we could shape Legacy Mode to be something interesting that is completely relevant and new in 2014. Keep that in mind for this week. Ultimately, I'll be sticking with the evolution of combat just because it allows me to do so much more with the keyboard, which I have always been a keyboard-based player. So I can have my food on my keyboard, I can have my prayers on my keyboard, I don't need to use the mouse as much, I don't need to know where the prayer button is to switch to the prayer interface, I don't need to have my backpack button ready, I don't need to spam click on food. It's just a much more casual experience for me being able to use the keyboard than needing to click, if that makes sense. Anyways, as I mentioned this week, we're recording episode 470 of RSBANB Update. This will be a live show recorded in RSBANB's Mumble server. Link is below as to where you can find info on how to join that. We'll be recording this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And of course, this week we'll be talking more about Legacy Mode, specifically maybe some Legacy bossing trips, the Queen Black Dragon, God Wars, that sort of thing. And of course, we'll also talk about the other global changes coming to combat, 138, potions, etc. So anyways, with that being said, we'll see you this coming weekend for RSBANB Update 470. And if you like what you've heard today, just hit that little subscribe button below. Talk to you next week, everyone. Goodbye.